You feeling stuck lately? Like life's passing you by? Get to know M.A.Y.A.
Acronym My Ambition, Your Ambition.
Reconnect with your dreams, your goals, your ambitions. Find your motivation and start to live the life you desire. Explore the M.A.Y.A. My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast at M.A.Y.A.Akai.com.
Namaste, everyone. Welcome to episode 56 of M.A.Y.A. My Ambition, Your Ambition. I know, normal we're on Thursdays. The time has been shuffling. I apologize. There are so many moving parts in my life right now, but it's all super exciting. But the one thing I am committed to is doing this podcast. And eventually, things will settle down. It will normalize. It'll be a set day and time that I will always be here. But I'm still committed to sending the message, whether it's on a Thursday, a Friday, or Saturday. My Ambition, Your Ambition is going to show up with a mental wellness message that's worthy of the wait. So like I said, episode 56, knowing your roles, know your roles, Jaboti, and making decisions that are aligned with your best self goals. I can't tell you how important this conversation really is. Because if you don't know your roles, getting to the best version of yourself becomes a lot more cumbersome because you are juggling many things and you don't even realize that you're doing it. But when you put your roles in perspective, it really helps to bring things into focus when you're working towards getting to that best version of yourself, or if you're stuck or you're struggling with happiness. Once you understand your roles in life, and you tend to have more than one, things tend to fall into place. So, as I like to say, namaste, everybody. Welcome to episode 56. As you know by now, I say M.A.Y.A., My Ambition, Your Ambition is a podcast that looks to embrace the salient topics related to mental wellness. Remember, my whole goal is to normalize the conversation about mental wellness. It's something that should be front and center all the time, just like any other part of your health should be. Your mind, as they say, is a terrible thing to waste. And your mind is the thing that really orchestrates everything throughout your life. Your physical health, your emotional health, your financial, your mind. When it's in sync, everything else tends to fall into place. So I like to take the idea of mental wellness and I want it to be a normal conversation for people. I like to think that I'm fresh and forward thinking in my perspective, but I try to focus the podcast to pull back that veil of self-doubt and self-sabotage that plagues so many of us in our lives to help you to identify the ambitions and how to harness that motivation to help you yield the satisfaction you succeed in your daily life. One of the things I focus on here is everyday living, not the lofty goals of happiness, not the lofty goal of being the best version of yourself, but being that every single day, because then it becomes cumulative and you get there in a way and you didn't even realize that you were making the journey. So if you are a first-time listener or viewer, well, as I say, buckle up for safety, because occasionally it can be an unexpected bumpy ride. I may say something that jars a memory or rises emotion in you, and that's what the podcast is really about. But this is always a safe space in regards to mental wellness. And of course, if you're a returning listener or viewer, well, then of course, you know how things go here. As I always say, grab a pencil and pen. You may want to jot down something that I say that jars a thought for you. Grab your beverage of choice. For me, I'm hydrating, I'm doing water, but it's 5 o'clock someplace. As a matter of fact, it's in the afternoon based on my time. So maybe you have a beer, a glass of wine, whatever it is that makes you feel comfortable. And since it's a Saturday, hopefully you're not working and you can really just kind of sit back and really get into the podcast. Remember the rule number one about this podcast is to work at your own pace. As you discover things through the process, you may be back in episode 35 because maybe that's where you have work to do. There is no time frame on this. Now, mind you, I love when you're front and center with me. I appreciate you tuning in every time I do a show live, but it's not the prerequisite. The key thing is that you get here and get something from the podcast. And I always tell people, if you can't get something, maybe somebody else can. I think it's amazing. Everybody thinks they're mentally well until a wheel comes off or you get a flat and then they want to panic. I'm trying to get people into the idea of doing the work daily about your mental wellness. So when you are faced with adversity, you're ready to face it. So for the next 60 minutes, it's all about you. Get comfortable. Find that place that can be quiet and you can focus on you. Now, something else within our housekeeping here, obviously, is if you want to join the conversation, you always can do so by placing comments on Facebook or YouTube, the comment section, and I can share it on the screen. So you may say something as, hey, I can identify with that. I had a similar experience, and I can share your comment on the screen with viewers or listeners. I'll make sure I read it. So if you're just listening to the podcast, then you obviously will know what was being placed on the screen. By now, you should know that you can listen to episodes of M.A.Y.A at myakai.com. Remember, with every episode, there is a podcast resource, which means I'm going to add some additional things that can add some breadth and depth to the conversation that I think is worthy of the read. So you can always go to myakai.com, click on the podcast resource link, and there it is for you. Hopefully, as we do our housekeeping stuff, you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Just type in M.A.Y.A, scroll past all the Japanese anime, and boom, there I am. Like, subscribe, and share, was what I ask. But if you have a podcast platform of choice, I'm not going to hold it against you. That's fair. We all like to listen how we like to listen. So you can find me on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Audible, Spotify, so many different places. Just make sure you put in M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and my podcast should pop up. And lastly, get social with me. Hopefully you are following me on Twitter and Instagram. It's Maya_Akai, and Facebook, M.A.Y.A Akai Presents. You can always keep abreast of what's going on with the show. Okay, toolbox time. It's a standard thing we do here. What's the number one thing we always do when we start the show? We put our most important tool on the table that technically should already been out the toolbox, because the rule is when you start your day, you should always take your emotional intelligence out of your toolbox to make sure that you're using it. As you know, if you're a first-time listener, emotional intelligence, EI, as it's often referred to by me, is how you perceive, evaluate, and control emotions. Not just your own, but how you can be intuitive of others. So you can be connected. Often this is where empathy comes into play. So we always put our emotional intelligence out on the table front and center. Like I said, it's midday. So really it already should be out. But just in case it's not, go ahead and get it out so you can make sure that when you're listening to this podcast, you're listening it from a way where you are perceiving the information that I am saying to you. You're evaluating how it applies to you and thinking about, well, how do I apply this? How am I controlling this in my interactions with others? So we always have that toolbox time, which really is the standard at this point. The overarching theme for this year, for 2021 for me, is knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom, Aristotle. It couldn't be any better than that. This show is focused on you. And when you begin to understand yourself, so many other things really come into play. So before you can connect and truly understand others, you have to understand you. I constantly say to people in therapy, look, you can't do this for somebody else. You have to be investing in this journey for you. Because if you're doing it from someone else, it means you're truly not dedicated at the interpersonal level as you need to be. And I always say, when you are the best version of you, it flows into every other part of your life, and everyone in your life benefits from you being complete as a person, or as complete as you possibly could be. So just know, knowing yourself is a being of all wisdom. They knew that thousands of years ago, says Aristotle. Now, as you know, last week in episode 55, we had a virtual mailbag. So you can always get involved. If I say something in an episode that sparks a thought, maybe you have an issue you're kind of trying to figure out, go ahead and drop me a virtual letter into the M.A.Y.A mailbag, and I'll address it either on that show. And sometimes I might actually include it as an entire show, because the question that was posed was so good, it was worthy of an entire show. So if you got an episode that's got you thinking, it's reflecting on how to navigate a difficult situation, or if you're just feeling stuck, well, you know what? Drop me a virtual letter and I will either address it on the show and or make an episode out of it. How can you send me a virtual letter, aka an email? Just email me at getinspired@myakai.com. Pretty straightforward. Send me an email at getinspired@myakai.com. And like I said, I'll either address it in the mailbag and or it just might be an episode. Okay, that's all the housekeeping stuff. Let's get into episode 56. You know, it was supposed to be on Thursday at 4:30, but it didn't happen because things are going on. The wheels are turning and I'm doing a lot of great things, but all those great things are making the podcast even better. So episode 56, knowing your roles in relationships and making decisions that align with best self goals. To me, this is if you're in therapy or thinking of therapy, this is really what it gets down to. Is understanding the roles that you play throughout your life with different people in different environments, how they affect your decision-making, and if it's affecting your decision-making in a negative way, or if you're not feeling like you are living to your purpose. The question is, are you overvaluing a role that no longer has the same value? Because it's not aligning with that best self goal you have for yourself. Okay, let's jump right into it. So, what's interesting about this is I kind of want to talk about this almost in terms of like a movie, because we watch movies. And our life is actually a movie. It's a personal narrative. Just it's not always being recorded, even though a lot of people are working really hard to record their lives, which I think is interesting. But the roles you play, just like any other movie or show you love on TV, has different interactions and characters and scenarios and situations that evolve. Hence, this is why we can make movies, because they're usually based loosely on something that someone has experienced. And they turn it into a movie, or they make a sitcom out of it, or a drama. So we wear many hats in our lives. We go to work, or we are coworkers, we are bosses in some situations. In our personal lives, often people are husbands, we are wives, sons, daughters, sisters, brothers, aunts, uncles, and of course, friends, significant others. We take on many roles on our life stage. And that's how you should start thinking of yourself. Is my life stage, what scene am I in? And how is this scene playing out? And how much am I writing this narrative, or is somebody else writing it for me? So on your life stage, no matter what role you're playing, each has an important but very unique expectation or need. And part of being the best version of yourself is understanding these roles and how they're playing out in your daily life. And are they aligning with the purpose and intention that you want to? So do you pursue these roles that you have with intention and purpose? And in this episode 56, we're going to explore these roles and discuss how they're different, but should work together to enhance and maintain the best version of you. And it's interesting because many people don't think about this, how many different hats that they wear in their lives and the demands that are placed on them. And they just kind of think of not understanding, and don't think it's weird, but you are many because of the roles that you have in your life. So think about it. What is relationship roles? And as we talk about this, I'm sure it'll make more sense to you if you really think about relationship roles. Also, I will refer to them as life roles. It's often a set of responsibilities every individual perceives that they possess, they exhibit, or act out from birth till death, seriously. So when you are born into the world, you automatically assume roles that you didn't ask for. You become a son or a daughter. You may become a niece or a nephew. You may become a grandchild. You have 3 roles from birth that you instantly step into. Now, what's interesting about those 3 roles, especially as a child, you have very little control over how those roles will unfold, especially in your early years. In fact, most expectations and needs are passed down to you from parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, caregivers. So we learn our roles from the people from our early interaction. So if you are born into a very strong, family, familia network, then family may be something that's really important to you. On the flip side, if you are born into a world where you don't have very close ties, let's say maybe you only have 1 parent, and there's nothing wrong with that, versus 2. Maybe you never get to know grandparents. Maybe your parent was an only child, so you don't have, like, let's say, aunts and uncles that can be part of a relationship structure with you. So it's really interesting how our early roles are impacted by outlying relationships, but they are imprinted on us very, very early. So people play different life roles, and responsibilities and duties may change according to our age. As you become more mature, more expectations may be placed upon you, let's say, as a daughter or son, or an aunt or uncle, or, for instance, if you're later in life, a grandparent, or you become a parent. So you're no longer someone's son or daughter, you're now someone's parent. So your roles shift and change, thus goes the responsibility that comes with them. So as your roles change or mature, remember they are clearly impacted by age, in some cases even gender, because you may be born into a family where gender roles are very strongly prescribed. Boys do this, girls do that, moms do this. How many women have you heard, and boy, we can say this has societal angst so frequently, I want to be a stay-at-home mom. Well, that's not exactly very popular anymore, because the current social thought is that women should go forth into the world and can have careers and go to college, and family doesn't have to be first. But notice where you get friction. There are some cultures that still strongly believe that a woman's place is in the home, rearing and taking care of family and her husband. And what's interesting is some women who assume that role don't have a problem with it. But if they're existing in a society that has a different narrative, the pushback can be there. You're being totally just like subdued, and you're not living to your potential. But what they don't realize is a person may feel comfortable as their role as a wife and mother. That level of importance works for them. It doesn't mean that they want to emulate what the current climate and society says a woman should be like. So you get friction culturally sometimes on the idea of the roles of women and men in the home. Very interesting, especially if you tend to maybe marry outside your culture, or you begin to experience other cultures and you go, wow, we don't do it like that in my household. It's interesting. So understanding roles within your own context of your own cultural experience, and the first experience being your family versus maybe someone outside, before you criticize someone else's role and how they're playing it out, you should first figure out if it's aligned with where they should be based on the narrative they have been running their entire lives. And it's not for us to judge if someone is okay with being a stay-at-home mom versus, hey, how about this? The pushback that men get if they want to be a stay-at-home dad. Within our society, it's like, what, you want to be a stay-at-home dad? What? Are you kidding me? So it's a challenge to what the role is supposed to be. This is why understanding roles, especially your own, and how you want to step forth into that role is extremely important. So age, gender, where you grew up location-wise, North versus South, East versus West, American versus being Asian, European, Latino, whatever, play into the foundation that is laid for people's roles. And I don't think that many people tend to think about that, but it's clearly worthy of reflection. So roles, as I just spoke of them, are very interpersonal and interpersonal within their very nature. So what I think people come to understand when they're aware of their roles, either they embrace it, they've decided that the way maybe they've acquired this role as a daughter, maybe they don't want to fit into the same vein or the same mold that women in their family has. So they crave to change it. And once you decide if you're embracing or you're changing a role, then you manage it accordingly. And the thing about it is we cherish our roles based on what's happening in our lives. So, you often see great pride when a person has their first child. My firstborn, we've been waiting for this. And then I'm not saying that 2, 3, and 4 doesn't matter, but the role now is different as being a single child parent versus being a multi-child parent. The needs, the responsibilities. And even within that context, I don't think people understand what goes into being a parent of multiple children. The demands are different versus female child, whatever the case may be. And then when you add in now we're embracing the idea of transgender, there's another whole dynamic to this. So even within a parenting role, once you go from being a parent of one to a parent of many, or a boy or a girl, whatever, your role actually shifts and what might be needed from you. And the question is, were you even aware of what that shift was or when it even happened? These are the small nuances of roles that people don't think about. Understanding the different roles in your everyday life will help you to understand your needs and the needs and the demands of others within those relationships or your social circle. And this is what people often don't think of. You hear people saying how they're just burnt out because they have several children and their homework, extracurricular, activities. I'm working, and then I want to spend quality family time. All these demands that come into the role of a parent, which, by the way, one role that never changes is the role of self. You wear many hats, you have many roles, but the one role that never changes is you. And that's the role that should be the strongest and the most well-written in your life play, if we look at it that way, so to speak. So roles can be intrapersonal as well as interpersonal. And a lot of people often don't think about that. Something else I want you to think about, because now I think for some people who are listening, the wheels might be turning like, I never really thought about it that way. I was just kind of going through my daily life, sometimes feeling under pressure, not realizing that if you step back and evaluate exactly how many things you're doing and why you're doing them, maybe you kind of need to get some clarity about priorities and figure out what's going on. So one thing I think that people sometimes will miss, that roles are relationships based by their pure existence. Let me say that again. The roles that you're playing in your life's play, your life's narrative, your stage, your big screenplay, this is your big however many years of fame or not, are based on their pure existence. I said you are born into roles instantly. Son, daughter, niece, nephew, cousin, grandchild. People don't even think about that. Now, mind you, all those roles don't have the same value, nor do they have the same weight within your life. But you come into this world already acquiring roles. And you learn of those roles as you mature and their importance and how they play into what makes you happy or what makes you unhappy, so to speak, if you stop and think about it. So, in interactions with others, pretty much we form these roles and they develop over time. But what's more important is that the initial purpose and the shape of the intentions or expectations are what heavily weighs on your roles. Let me say that again. Initial purpose, and every role does have a purpose. Some have different, more important purpose. Like, let's be honest, being a parent has more importance than being maybe a cousin or an aunt or an uncle or even a grandparent. But in some cases, being a grandparent may be paramount to their grandchild because they may now be the adult or their caretaker. So their role of being a grandparent is a dual role of, I'm now acting as your parent, but I'm really your grandparent. So these two roles have gotten blended. And yes, there's the ability to blend roles. A lot of times within extended families, you will have situations. Do you ever have maybe like an aunt and uncle that you're really close to, and you maybe felt like they were more of a parent to you than an actual parent? It's like a blended role. They took on this parental nature with you, and you came to revere them that way, though they weren't your parent. So sometimes there can be blendings of roles slightly, and sometimes they can have more depth. It just depends on the nature of the relationship. But the pure purpose of roles and how they're shaped is based on our interactions. And within those interactions, there's intention and there's expectation. There's intention and expectation in every single role that you have. So obviously, if you have a child, whether you made the decision or not, there's an expectation of how you're supposed to fulfill that role. And how you do it, if your intention is to do it the right way, you step to the plate. Often many people fail at parenting is because their intention is poor. I'm a mother or a father, but they're not doing the things they need to do to make sure their children are really cared for emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, beyond the financial scope. Because parenting is a multi-faceted experience for a child. You are more than just a provider of finances. You are a provider of experience that yield emotional and mental intelligence. So imagine when you get people who are not aware of that, or they themselves do not possess it. You know what you tend to see when that happens, unfortunately. So just remember that roles are shaped based on intention and or expectation. At some point, they weigh very heavily into what roles are. So if roles change over time, as relationships mature or change, or based on need or function, that's an interesting point. Because what you should realize is that roles are mutable, not fixed. Now, we talked about roles. Let me share something with you about a series of different roles, and you can look at this and say, well, I'm this role, I'm that role, I'm not this. I kind of want you to go through and kind of just mentally look over what I'm going to put on the screen and tell me, okay, yeah, I feel like I'm this, I feel like I'm that. At this point in my life, I was this. That role doesn't apply to me anymore. Because like I said, roles change over time. So they're mutable, not fixed. So a list of different roles. I gave some earlier. You may be a spouse or a partner. We talked about parents. You may be a sibling, brother or sister. You may take strongly as a role as an artist. Believe it or not, within your home structure, you could be the bill payer, the person who's responsible for things. As we go to school, we take on the roles of being a student. As we go into the world and buy products, we become consumers. Consumer roles are important because they drive, obviously marketing and advertising and where dollars will be spent. You may be a homemaker. Obviously, you can be an employee, which can tell being a boss. You may be a caregiver, a volunteer. You may be a learner. Hey, guess what? We are all citizens. And it's interesting because the argument about being a citizen is not taken very seriously often. This is why people get so up in arms about voting. It's like, you're a citizen. This is your voice. And that's why they try to get people to understand their role as a citizen. You may be an athlete. Within a school, an athlete has a different role than just a student might have. As we know that professional athletes often can be role models because of what they are. You may be a mentor. That's a role for somebody, a colleague, a retiree. You went from being in the workforce to now someone who's no longer in a workforce, and that's a different role for you. You may be an activist, a friend. You might be a person that says, check, not that one, check. Most of us can probably check at least 75% of this list, realistically. That either we're doing those things now, they're consistent, as you can see, I do this now. Sometimes maybe you wish you were more of these others. Or it might be a past. Think about being a spouse. If you lose a spouse, let's say they're deceased or you even become divorced, guess what? You're no longer a spouse or a partner. You're now a single person. So these roles, like I said, can change, and what's needed of you in these roles are different at different times. So now that I pointed out all these different things, all these different roles that you take on, some unconsciously, some subconsciously, you should really be reflecting on, wow, if I'm doing so many things at one time, am I doing them all well? Or wait, let me look at this a little closer. Are some realistically more important than others? Or do I think they all have equal importance? I want to approach all my roles with equal effort and make sure I put the same opportunity forward in each one of these roles. It's interesting. The reason I wanted to share that list is because I really believe in most cases, people don't realize how many roles, how many hats that you can wear in your life without ever intending to do so. And I think that part is so important to understand. So I talked about that roles are mutable, not fixed. We'll get in that a little bit more in a minute. Let's go ahead and do our first, and I think maybe only, real talk time moment of the show. This is where you gotta get to check your temperature about you and your roles and how you play into them. Did you ever take into consideration that relationships are fluid? We talk about things like plasticity and fluidity and evolving. And that's one thing I think where people get stuck in relationships is they don't realize how fluid and evolving they really are. They change, yet to you, they stay the same. You retain the same thinking on how they should be versus how they are. This is where many relationships hit a bump in the road. Who you are in the beginning of a relationship. Let's just talk about a romantic relationship or even a friendship. As time elapses within that friendship or even relationship, the level of responsibility may shift. The level of expectation may shift, which means it's not the same. So if you manage to maintain a relationship the same way that you started, like 2 years after you started, that's amazing to me. Because I'd be like, well, how much time do you spend together and how well did you get to know each other? Because relationships are always fluid and they're evolving if you let them do so. And you can't stop them, to be honest, even if you wanted to. So the question I would ask you, especially if you're struggling in a relationship, even at work, this applies to every relationship that you have. Do you understand that relationships are fluid and they evolve? And when they're changing, are you staying the same or are you acknowledging the change and moving with the change? You know how people hate change. They hate it and they fight it. And the more you fight change, the more it happens and the more complicated it is for you. So if you're trying to stay the same for whatever reason versus understanding that the change is going to happen, the shift will be there, this is where you run into issues in most situations because you can't fight the future. You can't fight change. And this is where people really get stuck. And I would say, let's put on a fresh pair of glasses. Let's look at how the relationship you're struggling with, how has it changed? Let's see. Have you grown emotionally and mentally? Like I said, in many situations, when you are attempting to really grow, what you have to understand within that journey, everyone's not growing with you. Some people are going to be 10 steps back. Some people you may find are 10 steps ahead and you come to realize it because you've opened your eyes. And here's the thing. I always say this repeatedly. Throw away the idea that I'm going to meet you where you're at. No, I'm not. Because if I have to go 10 steps back to meet you, it better be 10 steps that are worth me going backwards, especially if it's making me regress emotionally and mentally. So what am I taking 10 steps back for? I always say, how about we find a new spot to meet? How about I'm willing to take 5 steps back if you take 5 steps forward? And we have to define what that place looks like, whether it means open conversation, being able to be truthful in our emotions. What does that mean if we're creating a safe space that we can meet? So get away from the idea of I want people to meet me where I'm at. Well, sometimes you may be asking people to regress and that not be fair. So how about you find a neutral point? Let's be Switzerland in our relationship and be neutral. Just some real talk right there, because a lot of times people don't think about it. I'm going to tell you where relationships get stuck. Think, for example, of child and parent relationship. A child goes away to college or they're in early adulthood. You often have parents who refuse to let go of the idea that their children are no longer children, they're young adults. And they want to continue to shelter them or tell them what to do with their lives. And then you get friction. Generally speaking, once your kid goes away to college, now don't get me wrong, I'm not saying you can't have rules in your home, but you have to understand they've had a certain freedom, they've experienced some things and they've grown. So it never hurts to kind of do a checkup like, hey, how are things going in school? They're not going to tell you all their dirt, but say, hey, you're home, let's kind of review some things. If you still feel like a curfew is necessary, then you need to discuss that to see how they feel about it. Because let's be honest, they just didn't have a curfew for the last 8 months. They were generally away from you. And parents struggle with when their kids go away. People even struggle when their kids go to high school. Now, mind you, I'm not saying you shouldn't have structure and discipline and rules, but you have to understand you can't be a helicopter parent forever. You have to let your kids go forth into the world and figure out everything you shared with them to give them morals, values, and their core values. Guess what? If they're not tested, they're not tried, and they're not true. And then they will really make mistakes when you let loose the Kraken. And that's where parents don't get it. You can't hold them tight forever. So when relationships shift, especially with parent and children, you can't keep looking at your child like they're still 5 or 6 or 10, especially if they're 18, 24. I still see people that are coddling adults, like afraid to let them make mistakes and fall on their face. They feel like they still have to be responsible for them. And the question is, why? At some point, they must go forth into this world and figure it out. It doesn't mean you can't be there for support. It doesn't mean that you can't, help them out, but you shouldn't be the savior anymore because you've done your part as a parent. Think about too, if you've ever been in a situation where you were at a job and you get promoted. Peers often struggle with another peer that becomes their boss because they've known them probably on a more, let's say when I say intimate, I don't mean in a way that's inappropriate or sexual. I mean, like maybe they become friends or buddy. And now here comes a person that you were cool with who's no longer your peer at work, and they have to honestly manage you. And people blur the lines. They get upset with them. They expect preferential treatment. It's like, hey, if I'm doing my job, I have to do my job. And that's where things get difficult because there's now a shift or a change in that relationship that somebody in it doesn't want to accept, but it's real. And for the person who makes that shift, to be honest, if you have to have that conversation, like, I'm so excited to take this role, but understand I'm not your peer anymore. So I may have to do things that you may not like. I have to make changes. It's part of my job. It's not personal. It's business. And I hope you understand if that ever comes to that it's just the nature of the job. I'm always going to try to be fair and balanced, but that may not be something you always like. I may have to ask you to do something that you don't want to do, makes you uncomfortable, or it might be the very thing that we hated when we were the people that were being managed. So that's another time you see shifts that don't go well. Other times, key examples, is when people become divorced and they still have to parent. Oh my goodness. The buzzword is co-parenting. And the most times that people fail at co-parenting is they can't get past the emotion of being divorced people. Their emotion of being married still exists and they can't think outside of that emotion. But if we are no longer married, the level of responsibility is not the same. And I hate to seem mean about this. You have to step back and put your emotions on the back burner when it comes to your children to make the best choice for them. Co-parenting has nothing to do with you no longer being co-parenting as a married couple. You're now co-parenting as two people who are divorced. And the decisions that you make are going to be accordingly. People will fight, struggle, and the collateral damage is always the child because you have adults that refuse to understand your roles have changed. Not married, now divorced, different roles, different intentions, different expectations. And this is where people don't get it. So relationships will always change. They're fluid and always evolving. Even if you're two parents together, the nature of your relationship can still be evolving, even as married people. And a lot of people struggle with that. Okay, let's have our next toolbox time. We had our first one about, putting our emotional intelligence on the table. I talked right before this about mutable and fixed. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to zodiac signs, like this one's mutable, which means it's good with change. And you have some zodiac signs are very fixed, they don't do well. So here's something I want you to put into your toolbox, understanding how to be mutable and when you're being fixed. So as it says, mutable is liable and open to change versus fixed is held for a long time without change. Put this in your toolbox Because when you become rigid in a relationship, I want you to ask yourself, why am I being fixed? Because being fixed often is being rigid. Why can't I be mutable in this situation? Why am I fighting change? Why am I struggling with change? Why does change hurt so much? Ask yourself these questions because there is at the root of the problem of why you're struggling, why you are being fixed, why you are being stubborn. Some people think, oh, I'm just stubborn. No. Why are you being stubborn? Behind everyone who's stubborn, there usually is a reason why they have that stance. And for people who are flexible, which is mutable, there's a reason why they're open to change. Things to put in your toolbox, understanding how to be mutable and how to identify when you are being fixed. Don't get me wrong. There are times when being fixed is not bad, but you have to be open-minded if it comes time for a change, especially after it's been a long-standing period of being fixed. You have to be willing to be open to the conversation or the reason for why it's a necessity. So that's our second toolbox time of the show. Knowing your roles. So I gave you this great list of all these things. Know your roles, but what's the important roles? Let me put the list back up again. Here's all these different roles that you play in your life that you didn't even know you do. At some point, you might be a spouse, a partner, you might be a parent, you might be a brother or sister, you may be an artist. That may be your role is I'm artistic. This is what I lead my life with. You may be the bill payer. That's a role, which means you have things you have to get done or orchestrate to make things happen in your household. At some point, we've all been students. We're all consumers every day. The question is, how do you value your role as a consumer? Do you value your dollar? Do you put your dollar in the right place? Do you waste your dollar? Homemakers, you're a homemaker, whether you're a stay-at-home homemaker or you're a person who's working. You're still a person who is making of a home. An employee, a caregiver. You may volunteer. You may be a volunteer even without knowing it. Most people volunteer their time in their life without realizing they've taken on that role. Something comes up and they'll be like, hey, could you go pick up so-and-so from the airport? And you say, even though you might be busy, okay, I'll do it. You just volunteered. I'm not trying to be funny. We volunteer way more in our lives, and people think of being a volunteer as a more committed situation, like with an organization or a cause. No, you are probably volunteering more of your life away than you realize with people. Thank you for joining the show, Audrina James. She weighs in. Just like Audrina, you can also put a comment in Facebook or YouTube, and I can share it on the screen. What Audrina says is, I'm glad you're speaking on this. I've tried to explain these types of relationships to family and friends, and now I understand that I'm not mean. There's a bigger picture to be painted than the one you can only picture. Absolutely. The people, Audrina, that are giving you pushback about the roles and how too many roles can be overwhelming are the people who are being very self-centered. They don't want to think beyond it because it's pushing boundaries for them. No, you weren't being mean. Because when you're trying to get to the best version of yourself, it's important to not overextend yourself. And the thing about all these roles that are listed here is that when you're doing some of these, they're on autopilot. Let's be honest. You might be a spouse or a partner because you're in a relationship. But the question is, are you acting the best role as a spouse or a partner that you can? Are you being the best brother or sister that you can be? Are you being the best employer or caregiver that you can be? If you've taken on the role of a mentor, are you really being a good mentor to the person who has come to you to seek this type of tutelage or expertise that you may have? Are you being the best retiree? Some people people think of retirement like it is utopia, it is the promised land. And they get there and they're like, oh my God, I can't take this, because their purpose has shifted in a way they didn't expect. So these are all things to consider. Are you being a good friend? I'm going to tell you something about being a good friend. And I had a hard and fast lesson, but I'm going to tell you something. I would never take back the lesson. Being a good friend means being able to be honest under all circumstances. So if your friend is doing something that bothers you, it's having the ability to say, hey, Maya, I need to talk to you about something. And I'm going to tell you something. It's how you say something to people. Some people will be defensive. Last week we talked about being in your feelings, but you can use that to your advantage. But it's how you approach somebody with something that bothers you. If you are confrontational or criticizing, chances are they're going to shut you down. It's how you approach someone. It's the art of communication. Way back in some episode, I talked about communication with people. You have to set the table, the stage. We're talking about roles. So if you're setting this scene in your life where you have to talk to a friend, How many times have we seen this in a movie, your favorite show? I got to talk to somebody about something that's not good. What do I do? And sometimes you confer with somebody else like, how should I handle this? Real talk. If we're truly, really friends, I should be able to come to you and tell you what's bothering me. And I'll say, I need to discuss something with you. And I feel like you may not agree. It might make you angry. That's not my intention, but it's really weighing heavy on me emotionally. And because we're friends and this relationship matters to me, one of the things I want and I'm working on is having good communication. So because I feel this way doesn't make it a matter of fact. It might be the way I'm perceiving something. So I just want to say this before I share this experience with you. That's a way of setting a conversation up without seeing confrontational or criticizing. It's also saying, I'm not saying that what's happening may be intentional, but what you intend and what happens, AKA outcomes, are not always aligned. But it's how you talk to people. What do they say? It's not what you say, it's how you say it that either gets people or pushes them away. And that's true. But a good friendship, you can tell people. I had a friendship where this person just refused to listen and would only communicate with me by writing a letter because she felt like she could say everything she wanted to say, but didn't want me to have any feedback. And I was like, okay. But then if I wanted to comment on the letter, there was no room for that. It was like, I need to say my piece, and how you feel about it doesn't matter. That didn't work for me. Like, not even a little bit. So communication is key in friendships, is key in every relationship that you have. And when people refuse to listen, that's when you have to evaluate. I have this role as a friend. If I'm making this role important in my life with this particular person, I might need to step that back and put a little less energy into it, because guess what? Remember I said meeting where I'm at? Well, if I'm trying to do something positive in a meeting place, but you're bringing negativity, I'm gonna put that on the back burner till maybe you're ready to be there with me. But no, everybody may not meet where you are when it comes to emotional intelligence, because that requires doing work. And a lot of people don't want to do the work. Here's something I want you to think about when it comes to knowing important roles. Committing your energy to the roles that you have deemed to be important will help you to focus on what truly matters to you and rid yourself of those roles that do not align with your vision. I'm going to say this again, and this is why I put this on the creeper across the bottom of the roll of the ticker. Committing your energy to roles that are not deemed to be important is a waste of your time. You want to commit that energy to roles that are going to help you to truly focus on what matters, to rid yourself of those things that don't align with your vision. So remember, I gave a whole list of roles. The reason that was important is eventually, and we're going to talk about this on the other side, we're going to take a break, is that you got to know what's important to you. So you can stop putting, you know what, people spread themselves thin too much. You know what, let's be honest. At some point I came to realize that friendships are not excessively important to me. I value the few friends I have and I respect them and I'm there for them. But what I don't do is often invest a ton of time in them. And it's nothing personal. It's not them. It's how I am as a person. Right now, I'm focused on really getting to the best version of myself. This is why I do the show. I'm on the same journey you're on. So I realized when I had friends that taught me a hard and fast lesson, how they devalued my emotions and thought an apology of, my bad, I was being selfish. Okay, I'm glad you're taking ownership of it, but it's still not good enough that you totally relegated my emotions to zero. And I've known you for how long? This is a low, actually, I just chose to eliminate, not even devalue it. I just took it off the radar, not even on the back burner. I tossed the pot out the window, seriously, and hope it didn't hit somebody on the way down. But seriously, for me, friendships are great. I enjoy the interactions I have with people, but they're not my most important role. Right now, my most important role is focusing on being the best version of me and investing in myself as a person. So just know that the energy you spend trying to have juggling all these roles, figure out what's the most important roles. You should have only 2 to 3 roles, a max of 5 that really have the most important off that big list I just gave you. And of those 5, they should really have an importance at least in 1 and 2. Now you can fluctuate with 3 through 5, but 1 and 2 should be your top. Like, these are my top 2. These are the ones that I'm really working on a consistent basis. They mean a lot to me. Because here's the thing that I want you to think about when you pick out those important roles. 1, do the work to identify your roles. This is what this means if you got to really isolate the important roles in your life. Do the work to identify the roles. Once you identify the roles, I said, 5 at max, because then you're spreading yourself super thin when you get beyond 5. Because 1 and 2 should take a lot of your time and energy, and the other 3 take time and energy, but should not be nearly as much as 1 and 2. Seriously, prioritize them, as these are roles apply to your life right now. So I'll be honest. I don't know that being a son or a daughter should be one or two in your life. It could be. Maybe you're very close to your parent and that matters. I don't know. Maybe a parent has maybe stepped down to 2 or 3 because your kids are all away or they're adults. There is no guilt in this. And people struggle with that. If I don't make being the perfect or the right kind of parent, number 1 or 2, I'm bad. No, your role is now different because your kids are adults. So you get to like have a role shuffle. You get to write some new scenes in your life, the empty nester. And people forget that. So identify the roles. 2, prioritize the roles based as your life is right now, not in the past. So if all your kids are adults, I don't expect for you to be writing roles purely around parenthood. Maybe grandparent steps in. I don't know. 3, evaluate these roles as you feel they align with the best version of you. So I'm going to tell you something. And people struggle with this. I feel so bad that, you know what, my kids want me to do this, but I don't want to do it. Why you feel bad? Don't feel bad. You get to have this time. It's your time. You've been the parent. So if at the top of the role is me doing me, don't be mad because you can't babysit for your son or daughter because they want to go do something. If you committing to babysitting really does not work for you, I'm sorry, they can't be mad because they've taken on the role of parent, and that doesn't mean that you were taking on the role of caregiver. Come on now. But people struggle with this because they don't have the courage to take ownership of their happiness. So 1, identify your roles, prioritize them as they stand in your life right now. 3, evaluate when these roles, how you're feeling. Do they work into the best version of you? That's key. And once you do this, it will help you to understand really where to place your energy. But I know it's hard. People struggle with telling other people no. I guess I've got the art of saying no. And I know it's that people try to make me feel bad when I say no. And I'll be like, look, I'm sorry you feel that way, but I have to keep me in mind. And I'll say that, like right now, I'm in this place right now where I got to work on me. I can't do this with you. I've pushed off negativity, especially within my family. I got some people that are 100% pure drama. Nothing they do surprises me. There's always a crisis, and they're always doing the same behavior repeatedly to get the same outcome. So when they come running, I'm like, hold, stop, wait. Miss me with that. And I say it. I said, because you're not doing anything different in your life to have a different outcome, to have a better life. So please don't run over to me like this is a crisis again, because it's the same issue you had last time. And I don't see you putting in the work to do better. So come at me when you're doing better, but don't come at me with the same stuff. And they're like, so you know what? I'm kind of a mean person in the family, but you know what? You know what it keeps away from me? All that negative energy, because I'm not letting other people taint me with the fact that they're not willing to do the work. My number 1 role right now, I'm writing scenes for M.A.Y.A. And these scenes are going to be driven by the character I want to put out there and the experiences I want to have. And what I don't need is drama and extra people in my life. Let's take a quick break. When we come back, let's expand the conversation to address, more things that get into roles in your life vision. Because what I was just talking about is I'm looking at my roles and how they're aligning with my life vision. We'll talk about that after the break. And hopefully by then, this break will let you kind of let this sit in like, whoa, I got roles. Ooh, what am I writing in this script of life? Because guess what? You write the scripts of the roles that you play. Nobody, if somebody else is writing your scripts and the lines that you're playing out, you better recognize that and figure out how to change it. We'll talk about that after the break. You're tuned into M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition. This is episode 56. Know your roles in relationships and making decisions that align with the best self goals that hopefully by now you have set for yourself. We'll be right back, everybody.
Please stop and listen, because this important message may directly apply to you or someone dear to you. Several thousand African American former full-time CPS teachers were unfairly terminated starting in the mid-90s and continuing to the 2000s. If you are one of those many former CPS teachers who was unjustly terminated, or if you are the immediate relative of a now deceased unjustly terminated former CPS teacher, you may qualify to participate in a lawsuit at no upfront cost to you. Please call 773-580-7183 immediately for more information. That's 773-580-7183. Do not delay. Act today. because time is of the essence. That's 773-580-7183. 773-580-7183.
Stepping out of bed. It's easy to take for granted. You work, eat, play, sleep, and get out of bed the next morning. Seems simple. But if you're one of 25 million individuals in the United States living with major depression, sleep isn't always so easy. Neither is navigating your daily life, free of guilt or hopelessness, or having the ability to enjoy time out with friends, make simple decisions, enjoy hobbies, or go to work. Major depression is the leading cause of disability across the United States, and without treatment, the frequency and severity of symptoms tend to increase over time. However, there is hope. Major depression is treatable, and there is no one-size-fits-all approach. Today, there are a variety of treatment options to choose from. The key is to get an evaluation and find a treatment plan that is right for you. Free education, information, and support programs are available. You are not alone. We can help.
It's okay to think you're in a toxic relationship with the world right now.
It's okay to feel like your world is changing.
It's okay if it's hard to find the words to express how you feel.
It's okay to feel like you just want to become someone else.
It's okay if you're panicking over an inability to control your life right now.
It's okay to have trouble maintaining your normal routine while staying home.
It's okay if you're feeling more cynical than usual.
It's okay if you want to curse more than you usually do.
It's okay to wear your favorite tank top several days in a row.
It's okay to miss your job.
It's okay to just stay quiet.
It's okay to be depressed.
It's okay to talk to your cats like they understand what you're saying.
It's okay not to feel the most fabulous right now.
It's okay.
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 Whether you're on the go or listening on your cell phone, tablet, or laptop, you can find the show in the iTunes, Google, and iHeartRadio platforms.
With all due respect, I believe this is going to be our finest hour.
Just search M.A.Y.A, My Ambition, Your Ambition, and get ready to be inspired and motivated to harness your ambition.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 56 of M.A.Y.A, knowing your roles and relationships and making decisions that align with your best self goals. You know, and again, a lot of people struggle with this because they feel like they have to be selfish. Well, there's a certain part of time where being selfish is appropriate. Just like you can go through life being selfless, always doing for others, you should never have any type of apprehension or second thought of doing something for you. The same passion and energy you can have towards others, if you don't have that towards you, there's something wrong. But we're often taught to not appreciate, celebrate, and to put ourselves first because you're told that's selfish. But just because you do that doesn't mean you're selfish. It's how you do it and why you do it and when you do it that matters. I really like that. It's okay. It's a combination of different networks, TBS, TNT, HBO show, in saying it's okay. We're in difficult times right now in the pandemic. And I keep explaining to people, this is the best time right now to really get upfront and personal with yourself. This time frame of these last year and a half has probably presented people with so many obstacles and setbacks. At the same time, for other people's, it became opportunity and a growth point because of where they emotionally and mentally were at when it started. So where you're going to end is going to be totally up to you. So before the break, we talked about a lot of different things. What roles are, knowing the important roles that you have. We covered a lot of different hats you're wearing that you probably didn't even know subconsciously that you were using or part of, or seeing that you were part of, that just never crossed your mind, of how many things, how many roles you step into on a daily basis. Seriously, on a daily basis, you may have 10 roles that you may play. Think about it. You might be a parent. You may be a spouse, significant other. You may be, go to your parents' house, so now you're a son and a daughter. Now, mind you, you're always something, but it's when your live action is going is when this matters the most. So maybe you go to your parents' house, and now you're a son and a daughter. Maybe visit an aunt or uncle, so you're a niece or a nephew. Maybe your grandkids come over, you're a grandparent. You went to work, so you were an employee. See how many, just in the course of a day, how you can play different roles throughout your life. And like I said, some have more importance than others. And one of the things I wanted you to do before the break was, what are your top 5? I don't think you should have more than 5 roles that have paramount importance to you. I don't care what else you do, but the 5 roles that you sink your most energy, focus, and dedication into, because they really are important to what you feel like harnessing the happiness you seek in your life, but also they fit into your best version of you goals. So let's wind this down by talking about roles in your life vision, because this is where I think sometimes that people kind of get lost in translation. It's like, oh, wow, I got all these roles. So how exactly should I figure out what's important and how should I place them? I think you know what role is most important. I would like to believe within this conversation, everybody could put themselves in the first role. I am important. Who I am, fulfilling my needs emotionally, mentally, financially, spiritually, physically, whatever the case may be. I hope you're at the top of the list. That should be the first most important role, being you. Because remember, when you are the best version of yourself, all your other roles will tend to play out pretty well because you feel confident. You know you are competent and you act accordingly. And this is why self-awareness is so important. We talk about self-advocacy all the time and people struggle with it, finding their voice and coming forth into the world with it. And having their truth and not caring how other people feel about your truth. Look, my truth may not or will not align with yours. And they're not necessarily meant to be that way. But it doesn't mean that my truth has any less importance than yours and vice versa. There is space in the world for everyone to exist. People just don't want to allow it to happen because we assume that there's a pecking order to things. Well, only if you want there to be. So, We discussed understanding roles and which ones currently are important to you. Which roles are you playing? Most people probably just realize, oh, I'm doing all kind of acting right now in my life. Didn't even realize it, because this is your life stage. This is like your one man, one woman show. I love it. And my thing is, when you think about your life as being your one man, one woman show, yes, your life is a show. So hence, you should always be focused on what's playing out on your life stage. What script is being written? Do you need to go back and make some revisions to that script? There is so much there that I think people don't understand, that there's a script that's playing. Now, are you letting your life just go unbridled? You're just flying by the seat of your pants and you're okay with it? Some people love to be spontaneous. They just like that. Other people like for things to be a bit more fixed and scripted. Remember I said our toolbox today was learning that you have to be mutable sometimes. When change is happening, stop fighting it, especially if the change makes sense. But if you can't stop it from happening, the question is, what do you do with it? Being fixed all the time is never healthy. Getting outside your comfort zones. I don't know what episode that was, but I would tell everybody, go back and jump into the comfort zone episode of M.A.Y.A. Remember, you can go back to MAYAkai.com and you can find all my episodes there. You can find them on iTunes, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and you can listen to past episodes. To me, that episode is one of the most important things because understanding comfort zone is how you understand how you're going to get to the best version of yourself, because you realize, oh, I'm real comfortable when I'm here. But when I step out here, it just really doesn't work so well. Adversity is what makes us grow and change. And it will help you to get to the best version of yourself. So on your life stage, what roles are playing out and how are they playing out? Are you happy with what you see? And if the last scene you just acted in didn't work for you, like you're like, you know what, I am so embarrassed. That's not me. Make sure you don't repeat the performance because you are in control of your thoughts, your actions, and your words. Remember, our biggest tool here is we are going to respond to life and situations, not react. Because react is like clean up in aisle 9 because you're going to break something, drop something, and make a mess. And then you got to go back and clean it up. But if you take the time to use your emotional intelligence, you will respond. And I'll tell you, people don't do well when you respond appropriately. They kind of get a bit out of sorts, especially if their emotional intelligence isn't where yours is. They don't know what to do with somebody who's being calm and rational and not feeding into their negativity or not stoking their fire. You ever know a person will get angry, like they're yelling and screaming, and you're just looking at them and they're like, say something, because they need you to say something to keep the narrative moving in the wrong direction. And if you say something rational and say, I apologize, that wasn't what I expected to happen. And I'm sorry I hurt your feelings or I offended you. And then they'll take that and spin it. You didn't hurt my feelings when you probably really did. They just don't want to do it or own it. It's interesting how people will behave when they have low emotional intelligence. But when you have high emotional intelligence, you know what you're looking at. So you know how to respond to it. Like, maybe we should revisit this conversation when there's a little less tension or friction here. People who don't have good emotional intelligence want to keep the ball rolling. They do. They want to absolutely exhaust the emotion. When people exhaust emotions that way, it's never healthy and there's never a good outcome. Just know that. So we discussed understanding your roles, and in your one-man, one-woman show, remember, if the last scene you were in didn't work for you, rewrite the next scene so it's not the same, or you're not continuing the same destructive or behavior that's really not beneficial for you. If you haven't, it's time to get focused on issues that are most important to you. Roles often have issues or concerns that need to be addressed for growth. How are you, more importantly, how are the roles impacting your life? So if you're a parent, for instance, and I hate to say, I keep bringing up parents because I feel like I hear this the most from a lot of people. Is your life as a parent, is it really complicated? And let's say you're dealing with adult children and you just are unhappy. You feel you're doing nothing right. You can't make them happy. Step back and ask yourself a question. At this point, why are you still trying to do that? If you really felt you've given your best, you've given 100, but it wasn't good enough, that's where you stop, because maybe it's not you. And if you can't do enough, that's okay too, because you fulfilled your needs. Now, if you felt like you didn't do all you could do as a parent and you want to do more, to be more of an assistant as your adult children move on, okay, I get that, because some people feel like I didn't do as much as I could have, but I'm in a position emotionally, mentally, and maybe even financially to do better now. Don't overspend it, but do so. So ask yourself, what are the issues that are most important to you? And how are these things impacting the roles? Within these different roles, like when you're at work, do you have passion? Do you feel you have purpose? When you're in your respective relationship with your significant other, do you feel like you have passion? Do you feel like you have good purpose? Do you feel like you're, accommodating? Do you feel you appreciate? Do you feel like you celebrate that other person? Do you feel like when you're doing these roles, seriously, do they align with your efforts? Here's what's key. Do they align with your efforts to be the best version of yourself every single day? Did it align with your effort to harness happiness in your life every single day? If you're acting these roles and they're not working towards you being the best version of you, they're not playing into your happiness, you need to go back and reread that role and figure out, am I overacting this role? Am I underacting? Is this role even as important as I'm making it in my life? Is it important to somebody else and I'm just kind of filling a void because I feel like I have to? So if they're not working to the best version of you, if they're not playing into your happiness, I need for you to stop. And it's time for you to do some self-evaluation and maybe some character rewrites. Seriously, like what other characters are playing on this life stage with you? Do you have a friend who's toxic? Do you have a family member who's toxic? Do you have a significant other or a spouse who's demanding? Do you have children who are demanding and it really weighs on you heavily? How are these people interacting on this life script you've got going in these scenes? And ask yourself a question. Is it important that they're actually in many scenes of my life, or is this somebody that legitimately doesn't belong because they don't appreciate nor do they respect my emotional and mental space? So why am I allowing them to occupy it? I always say all the time, we will allow people to occupy emotional and mental space with us that we should not. The last person that I literally had a falling out with, which really took me aback, and at the end I was like, that's really unfortunate she felt that way. She really took exception with me. But she was taking exception with the way that I was living my life because it didn't align with hers. And my only response would have been, if we really would have had the final conversation, at no point of time did I ask you to co-sign on anything I was doing with my life. At any point of time that you didn't like something I was doing, you had the freedom to exit any interaction with me anytime you wanted, because this friendship is not permanent or binding. So I don't care if you don't like how I do it, when I do it, because I'm doing it because I want to do it. I know that might sound a little selfish, but my thing is that I'm not asking someone to hang out or stay with me. If something I do does not align with your core values or what your current goals are, then you are not obligated to be here with me. But don't come complain about me, because maybe I'm doing me because this works for me. Me doing me doesn't have to work for everybody. And that's something that a lot of people struggle with. That self-evaluation. If it's good for me, I mean good, not like self-destructive stuff. I mean, like, I'm doing good stuff. I'm communicating, I'm celebrating, I'm getting out there, I'm doing the things that I want to do that make me happy. That doesn't have to align with everybody in your life, because you may not be everyone's cup of tea. That refers to friends and family. Everybody may not do well with you, and that's okay. And you have to be okay with that. So you might have to do some character rewrites of people that you're allowing to share your emotional mental space that really don't appreciate it, nor do they need to be there. Think of your favorite shows and the roles that are played and how they evolve through the roles or characters, and think about how characters started in some movies or even shows versus how they finish. So think about shows like Empire, how Lucius, how he started and how he ended was entirely different. It was a growth point. Think about movies like, now I'm showing my age, like Waiting to Exhale. The girl from being a stay-at-home stay-at-home wife who was living the life, but then her husband cheated on her and her life got turned upside down and she had to explore new ways to grow and change through friendships and other things. Don't laugh. Think of things like Star Wars. Okay, I had to throw a sci-fi thing in there because I'm totally like a sci-fi junkie. But if you think about the growth of Luke Skywalker from, young Luke on Tatooine versus how he ends, by the time we get to the Return of the Jedi. Every movie and show is about growth and development and change. You see it all the time, every day on TV. Understand your life is pretty much the same way. It's just not being caught live and there's no edits. When it happens, it happens. We can't go back and change and rearrange things. That's the biggest difference. So think about it. If you're looking at your life's drama, is it that kind of show? Is it riveting for the right reasons? Or is it riveting for the wrong reasons, is what I would ask you when it's all said and done. I know I've gone a little bit over, but I really enjoyed this conversation. And I thought it was so important to really get it out there so people can understand your roles are so important. So let's get into the final thoughts as we wind down the show. It's important to understand we are multifaceted beings. In regards to our daily lives, seriously. The way we live, the way we love, the way we learn, the way we hurt, but more importantly, the way we heal. The more you understand that getting to the best version of yourself is an intricate and very intimate experience that has many nuances that involve trial and error, hard and fast mistakes, along with some limitless successes, the easier it will be to get there because you have come to understand self-acceptance is the key to it all. And it comes with imperfection. But within that imperfection, it becomes brilliance for some people. Remember, diamonds are rough, but look how they shine when they're shaped and crafted and polished. We are the same. We see so many things transformed within the world, and yet we can't see how we can transform ourselves. And it can be done. So this is episode 56. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. I feel like this is one of my better episodes and it got pushed around all week, but I made space for it. Knowing your relationship roles and making decisions that align with the best version of yourself. If this didn't do anything for you, it's okay. Share it with somebody else. This might be something that could really make a difference for somebody else. So thank you to everyone for listening to this episode. As I said, the whole purpose of this, I'm your friendly mental wellness advocate, and nothing here is therapy, advice. It's purely insight into mental wellness and some things to help you on the journey. And if definitely something resonated with you, maybe you should consider getting a therapist or a counselor to really do this work with someone else. But this is not what I'm here for. I'm here to spark the thought to move you towards getting to that best version of yourself. So whether we help you to identify that ambition, how you can harness that motivation, and happiness, all that good stuff. Hopefully it starts here. Remember, every episode can be found on Apple Podcast, iTunes. Let's see where else. Amazon Audibles, iHeartRadio. There's so many places. I always say, though, the easy way to listen to the show is just go to M.A.Y.A.com. And you can find all episodes. And remember, with every episode, there is a podcast companion. So there'll be some additional articles I'm going to post that I think can give this conversation more breadth and depth as you kind of do the work. Also, hopefully by now you have subscribed to my YouTube channel. You can go to YouTube and search M.A.Y.A. Like I say, always, scroll past all of the Japanese anime and you're going to find me. My face is there. So like, subscribe, and share. I appreciate all the support that people give me and supporting my show and the feedback. Remember, send me a virtual letter to the M.A.Y.A. mailbag. Maybe you have a question. You have a question based on something that happened in the episode. And, like, hey, M.A.Y.A., you said this. I have a question for you. Or I have a situation I'm dealing with. That situation may turn into an entire episode if it's good enough, or it'll turn into the virtual mailbag episode, and I'll do a couple different letters when people weigh in on some things that they're struggling with. Brandy Harris, thank you for tuning into the show. See you later, M.A.Y.A. It's always a pleasure to reflect and gain awareness about moving forward in life. Yes, I learned from everybody that's a part of my life. I've learned so much from Brandy Harris. I can say people like you motivate me to want to do better, and to want to share and help people to kind of move along in a way that can help them to get to that place they want to be in their lives. And by the way, it's never easy, and every day is not going to be sunshine and rainbows, people. I just want to say that. So until next time, everybody, remember, your present becomes your past and your future is no more. Think on that. That's heavy. So make the most of every single day. Be well. Always be safe, but more importantly, and this is the one I like the most, keep being absolutely amazing. I'll see you all next week. Ciao.
Get inspired, get motivated with M.A.Y.A. and the M.A.Y.A. My Ambition, Your Ambition podcast.
Something that I take pride in is trying to be forward thinking outside the box, challenging myself. And as I challenge myself, hopefully I challenge you.
Find M.A.Y.A. on Twitter and Instagram at M.A.Y.A_Akai. On Facebook at M.A.Y.A. Akai Presents.
We're going to talk health, wealth, fitness, mental health, financial, lots of different things that can empower you as you seek out the ambition that you're pursuing.
Or get everything M.A.Y.A. at M.A.Y.A.Akai.com.